welcome to the show, brother.
Very kind. Thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. We're going to have a good show today. Lots to talk about. Usually we talk about empathy and we talk about how people made it through COVID. For me, I think there's two things that I want to talk about today. Is one, we're close to getting out of the house. So so for me, I want to know, what are you going to do when you get out of the house? And then I want to talk about the paper and who are you going to get it in front of? Because now everything's changing. What you're working on is so meaningful. Now you can actually have it and have people with you talking about it. So welcome to the show, and let's dig in one of those two spots. You pick it.
I'm good to go, Darren. I'm actually just getting ready to start traveling again, right? So whenever the clients say, come on site, I'm ready to do that. But I have survived COVID probably better than others, just because I'm an introvert to begin with. So it wasn't, I'm not saying that it had no impact on me. It just wasn't as bad as some of my extrovert friends. So I'm actually anxious to get in front of clients again and having that kind of more intimate conversation. WebEx goes okay, but there's nothing that really substitutes for being face to face.
Yeah, and I think for me, I'm ready to go meet. I still think I'm only ready to meet like 2 people at a time for coffee. I don't know if I'm ready to meet more, but yeah, I'm excited to get back on the plane. I'm excited to get back into into some type of I just want to get back on that really narrow airplane seat and clean the table and clean the chair. I don't know why I want that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I used to lament that I have to get on a plane again. I have to stay in a hotel again. And now I'm looking back on those like glory days, right? I can hardly wait to do it. Yeah, so it's it's a little confusing.
I think I should start looking at credit cards and start re-getting credit cards so I have better access. I don't have the credit card or American, and I'm the last guy on. I think I got to get some credit cards now. I think that's going to be what I do next year is get more credit cards.
I gained a lot of miles, right? And a lot of hotel points, right? So they keep on extending me, so we're going to keep your points going. So everybody's hoping that we're going to get back on a plane and start traveling.
Oh, that's awesome. So now I want to dig into this paper, all right? And I read the brief or the abstract, and I was dug into some of the charts and graphs, and I think it's spot on. And I'd love to get a sense of, you can tell me in the audience, when did you come up with the idea, and why did you think about this, and why is it important? Give me everything. Let's dig into it, because it's.
Yeah. So we call it PAM. It's Prolific Agile Migration, and it really was the culmination of a couple of different accounts, but in one particular account, we're really facing a massive migration across multiple legacy systems. And Gartner, I'm not going to claim that I created these names: refactor, replatform, rebuild. Gartner thinks that there's 7 migration nuances from legacy to any kind of modern architecture. In our case, that modern architecture happens to be a cloud type of architecture. And I don't know that I'm a proponent of all 7. I can see the value of all 7. But in contrast to those all 7, what I witness in these migration huddles, right? And we're not talking, Prolifics isn't the only one that's involved, right? There's all the big consulting firms, and, it's just like a whole gaggle of geeks that get together, and, everybody's arm wrestling about how this is going to happen, blah, blah. And one of the things that I notice is that our industry still has this knee-jerk reaction to do a complete redevelopment and redesign. It's okay, we're going to take this massive legacy environment. I mean, when we say massive, it might have been growing out there for 10 years. It covers, multiple lines of businesses, potentially hundreds of departments. Could be thousands of user communities that are digesting information out of that analytic platform. So there's a whole culture, there's a whole ecosystem that has grown up, and some of those applications are as old as that platform, right? So they're brittle, they're highly tuned to that platform. The minute you touch them, it's like paper, it'll just dissipate. So the knee-jerk reaction to just say, okay, guys, we're going to take all of that, we're going to redesign the whole thing, and then we're going to throw it up in a nice, pretty solution up in a modern architecture, I think is just absolutely naive. And that's my politically correct term, naive. You know, because it has so much of an impact across so many different user communities. So I try to isolate our focus to a user community, because it's not a whole department either. There's various user communities, even with a department, that are going to have various needs. You know, some of them might be very anxious to get off of that legacy system. You know, some of them might be very anxious to say, look, I want a whole redevelopment effort. But there's going to be plenty of others, if not the majority, that say, you know what, I want to be a good corporate citizen. I don't necessarily have the time or the budget, but I want to, you know, I don't want to slow us down. But if you can make it as painless as possible and start introducing us to this modern architecture, you know, I'm all in. But if you're going to try to do a whole redevelopment stuff, we're just not there yet, right? We don't have the time, the energy, the budget, whatever. And so we see plenty of that diversity, right, in organizations. And the knee-jerk reaction to just do a whole redesign is so naive, because first of all, for some of these large legacy environments, that redesign is going to take forever. And business still has to continue, and there's still going to be plenty of development going on in that legacy system. I mean, it's just, again, it just seems to be naive. I'll pause there because I'm probably over caffeinated. But
no, I think it's spot on. Is that problem because data lakes are now too small, or is it there's just, you got to now choose where to put the data, then you have to choose what data to delete because you don't want to pay to have it moved? I mean, what is, this sounds like the result of something. And is that what's going on? We just, too much data is being stored and we have to either.
You know, I reserve the right to change my mind. I'll give you some of my perspective, and, you know, but I reserve the right to change my mind. I'm going to start with the more dark side. I think that there are plenty of instances where IT still thinks they know more about what business needs than what business thinks. And I've had executives tell me, you know, we don't want you really to talk to any of the business. We know what they need. And I always worry about that, right? This is like the perennial problem with IT and user communities, right? IT's always had this, it seems to be this constant struggle. I was reared by COBOLers back in 1975, right? So I was raised in this kind of culture where, you know, we go through all the specifications, we get all the user community to sign off and everything, 6 months to write the code. We come back, and 3 seconds after we show, you know, Bob the code, he says, this is wonderful. Can you just add one more column here? And you know, and so the IT people would just go fanatic, right? You know, oh my God, these users are always changing their mind, blah, blah. And then the users never understood why we were such drama queens. You know, what's the big deal about adding a column? Well, they never understood that. And I'm not sure that we've ever gotten past that. Frankly, I still see evidence that IT is not as intimately engaged with business as they probably should be. Does that make sense?
It's interesting you say that, because I think at the big enterprise, the large enterprise, we know that the big consulting companies have their ear. And that's what I hear is, I can't believe we're paying these big consulting companies all this money for these solutions. So I see there's multiple layers to that, right? Because we know who the CTO is going to listen to.
You know, I
don't know.
No, I'm going to latch on to what you said about the big consulting companies, because I often find that Their recommendations are guided by their revenue and not necessarily for the value of the client. I'll put it out there. I come from a relatively small consulting company. I mean, we're 1,000 strong, but compared to some of these other big folks, I don't know that the client value is their main focus.
No. It's the same way. I mean, if you look at it, it's automation anywhere. It's Snowflake. I mean, there are some brands out there that, like, I know a lot of people at those brands that are just getting walked in to big enterprise to automate or to move to a storage. I don't think those solutions are bad. You know, I think there's no perfect solution, but you bring up a good point on how big enterprise buys global products. And there's a huge moat around SAP for a reason: compliance, security. You might not like it, or Oracle, but like, there's a huge moat. And the one that I see that can play large and small is someone like Salesforce. I mean, we're jumping around on solutions, but again, if we're going large enterprise, there's still just a handful of companies that can handle large enterprise and pass the RFP, the procurement process, the data security, the data compliance, the GDPR, blah, 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 blah. So it's unfortunate, but the small guys get squeezed.
I think, though, from an analytic perspective, so I can't really address everything about SAP, although I've been in those accounts where I've had major issues with their old BW environment, right? It was twice as much effort to get stuff in and twice as much effort to get some stuff out. And I've had their executives call executives of my clients saying, you know, look, everybody else has got us. You guys need to get us. Irrelevant of what, you know, that geek Gonzales had to say, right? You know, that's very real. And it happens in the analytics space. But in the analytics space, I think we have a little bit different dynamic in that, frankly, Python is giving better performance and a more broad array of models that you could throw at it than a lot of these legacy analytic platforms do, right? And we're seeing, I mean, literally evidence in terms of better accuracy, better performance. You know, when you're talking about leveraging containers and MPP and all the open source stuff that's got a huge community, you know, so I think there's a lot different dynamic when we're talking about analytic platforms than, say, for instance, an SAP. And so for us, when we're talking about migration, you know, if you're thinking about that, there's sirens, so I apologize if there's some background noise. If we think about the migration, there's going to be folks in that on-prem, that legacy environment, that have written this particular type of code forever. And that's all they know. They don't want to change. So you get a lot of cultural, a lot of organizational issues that have nothing to do with the technology. They have absolutely nothing to do with what's better for the organization, right? So you know, we need to provide, I think we need to provide multiple ways to migrate the various different communities, so that for some, we have them optimized and modernized and all that wonderful stuff to take advantage of a cloud architecture. Yep. We have others that are just refactored so that we get them closer to at least the native architecture. In other words, we go from whatever, SAS to Python or PySpark, right? So we refactor the code. Right. We don't necessarily change the functional requirements, but at least we get them natively closer. And they can start experimenting and exploring. And then, of course, you do have that rehosting capability as well. So anyway, that's the whole. I don't know if I bounced all over the place.
Well,
I think
the
whole premise.
No, you didn't. No, I think there's a few things. Our audience loves this stuff. We are data architects, data scientists, data engineers at the chief executive level, you know, senior VP level. So we get these pain points. What I loved about this conversation, and also where we went with this, is the technical debt. I mean, that starts really at the startup phase, and you never catch up. I think we all can understand that technical debt. And I know a couple of startups that write a database in certain language just in case Amazon buys them. It would be a better acquisition, or just in case Microsoft. So you could, like, the strategy even between stacks, there are literally startups that decide the stack to use based on who they think their exit might be. Anything to maybe help that exit go. So we'll always be in the debt. I think that, I think the next thing I'm seeing is, everyone's racing to the cloud and everyone wants to do APIs. And I'm still worried about, how we choose which data to keep and which data to delete. Now, there are some industries that you have to keep data, right? So we know those are protected classes for industries. But I just think it's always interesting, just like going through your house, doing a fall season or summer wardrobe, you kind of have to purge. I think companies now are just purging because they don't want to pay the storage fees. I don't know.
Well, if we're talking about the modern architecture being a cloud, now it's a different pricing equation to a large extent, right? You're paying by the drink. And so if you really want the savings, if you really want that agility and the savings that a cloud architecture can offer you, you really have to be a little bit more judicious about what you're doing. When you're talking about an on-prem thing and you're saying, I'm going to pay $2 million for this license, whether I like it or not, whether I use it or not, it almost seems to be, it almost seems to foster, a wild, wild west scenario, or maybe kind of a lackadaisical attitude. We've got that. It's already a fixed cost. It is what it is. So the cloud architecture, I think, provides an opportunity for business to really, start exercising some of that savings and really be able to scale up and reduce down. But it definitely means that you have to be a little bit more focused on, more judicious about what you're doing and with what kind of data that you're doing it with, right? You can't just go out there and assume that you've got, whatever.
I know. So now we are a community. And as we talked about, we're a community, I think, that's built on empathy and people who love data, who actually have the war wounds of building teams. How can we help you? Are there some intros we can make? What sectors? How can we help you and your company succeed within our community? What can we do for you?
I appreciate that. I would love to have maybe another way to frame that. I would love to help support anybody in your network that is facing migration, legacy issues, and migrating them to a cloud environment. We do believe that this, I don't know, maybe it sounds a little corny, but a more business sensitive approach to migration is proving more successful than Thowis needs to turn this off in 12 months or else mentality, right? And so we would love to work with any of your community if they have any kind of ideas or issues or opportunities that surround legacy to a modern cloud architecture.
Huge. Legacy to modern cloud architecture. Legacy to modern, say that, cloud architecture. I love it. There are a few people I'm going to connect you with. I know that are going through a digital transformation, or others that are just playing in the same space. But hey, you never know. I think there's referrals, there's networks. Everyone just needs to be out there because we're not traveling. We don't sometimes have the pulse of like deal flow. So happy to make those connections for you. And you just never know where they go. If not, they'll just be good friends.
And thank you, Darren. And I got to tell you, as a smaller consulting group, we actually care about the value of the client, right? So we have intimate relationships with our clients, and their success is our success. We're not coming in like a big consulting company that you're lucky to have us, and we're going to throw an army or what. You know what I'm saying? We actually really. Yep. It's kind of like farm to table, right? It's far more personal.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Listen, it was great to have you on.
Thank you.
Thank you for sending me that abstract. It was great to read before. Easy to see why Gartner's looking at it. Just spot on. And however we can help promote you and that, just you let me know. And thanks for being on the show.
Darren, thank you very much. We'll send you the full paper. And if you could distribute it to your community, that would be great.
Counted. Oh, I was going to say, when do you think it'll be, when do you think it'll be published? Like in a month, a year? I just don't know when to look out.
I'm going to say 7 days, 10 days.
Okay, great. right. So yeah, we'll say end of May, and we'll say sometime in May it'll be published. We'll give you the buffer. That's great. All right, my man. You and the family, be safe.
All right.
I'll see you on the road soon. You got it.
Thank you, Darren.
Thanks.